Welcome to the deep dive. We take a whole stack of sources, figure out what really matters, and give you that shortcut to, well, really understanding a topic.
Yeah, getting you up to speed quickly.
Exactly. And today, we're plunging into something profoundly human. It's our tendency to sidestep the difficult stuff. You know, those uncomfortable questions or truths we just don't want to face.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because it's not always just about not knowing something. What this AI analysis we're drawing from the science of human avoiding hard questions suggests is that it's often quite an active process, sometimes even unconscious. We're actively disengaging.
Right, active disengagement. So our mission today is to really unpack that. We're going to pull out the key insights from this report. We want to help you understand not just what this avoidance is,
But the why. Why does it happen? And crucially, how does it affect us? You know, individually, but also as societies. And maybe what can we actually do about it?
Think of it as, a deep dive into a really fundamental part of being human, and apparently packed with some surprising facts along the way.
And there's this paradox right at the heart of it. The report highlights that sometimes this avoidance, it can actually be helpful, like a temporary shield against anxiety.
Okay, like a coping mechanism.
Exactly. But the flip side, the darker side, is that it often leads to pretty significant long-term problems. For our own well-being, sure, but also for these huge global issues like, say, climate change. It's got a much bigger impact than we might think.
That really sets the stage. Okay, so let's get into it then, the foundational science. Why are our brains seemingly so good at finding these shortcuts, especially around tough questions? This report mentions cognitive biases, calls them the brain's efficiency experts.
That's a great way to put it. See, our brains aren't always shooting for perfect objective accuracy. Often the priority is efficiency, speed, and maybe even emotional comfort. These biases are like automatic mental shortcuts.
Shortcuts, okay.
Yeah, they help us process the flood of information coming at us all the time. But the downside is they can lead us to beliefs or conclusions that aren't, let's say, perfectly aligned with reality.
So it's not necessarily that our brains are flawed, but more like they're optimizing, trying to be efficient and maybe keep us feeling okay about ourselves.
Precisely. Take confirmation bias.
Yeah.
We all kind of know we like to be right.
Sure.
But it goes deeper. It's not just seeking out info that backs us up.
Right.
It's how our brain almost constructs a reality that feels right. It filters things.
Yeah.
And it makes challenging our own core beliefs incredibly hard work.
And the report points out how this just gets amplified, massively amplified, in the digital age. These echo chambers we hear about.
Exactly. You end up in this feedback loop where you're mostly hearing things you already agree with.
Yeah.
It makes it even easier, even more pervasive to avoid those challenging questions or different viewpoints.
Which connects to the next point, right? Motivated reasoning.
Yeah, it's closely related. This is where we don't just process information neutrally. We filter it through our group identities, our ideologies. We trust sources that align with our tribe, and we're quick to dismiss sources that don't. The report uses the COVID-19 vaccine example. How confidence in vaccines, which didn't used to be so partisan, became really strongly tied to political affiliation. It was almost like your politics dictated what you were supposed to believe about the science.
Wow. That's a powerful example of how deep it goes. Okay, so what happens when things aren't clear, when we're faced with ambiguity, with uncertainty?
Well, that's where ambiguity, aversion, or certainty bias kicks in. Our brains show this strong preference for known risks, even if they're bad, over unknown ones.
Even if the unknown one could be better.
Even then. It's like choosing a guaranteed small electric shock now over a 50-50 chance of getting a bigger shock or no shock at all. The uncertainty itself is stressful.
So we crave certainty.
We really do.
Right.
Even if it's certainty about something negative. This bias makes us overestimate what we know, underestimate risks, and can make us quite dogmatic. We stick to what feels certain.
That definitely sounds like it could feel denial, sticking with the known even if it's harmful.
Absolutely. And optimism bias plays into that too. We tend to overestimate positive outcomes, it won't happen to me, and underestimate the negative ones. That's classic denial fuel, right? Ignoring a health warning or a financial red flag.
Yeah. And then there's a sunk cost fallacy. I think we've all felt that one.
Oh, definitely. Pouring more time or money into something just because you've already invested so much, even when it's clearly, objectively not working anymore.
It's avoiding that really hard question, was this a mistake?
Exactly. Admitting that is tough. And then there's the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is fascinating. It's where people with limited knowledge or competence in an area tend to vastly overestimate how much they actually know or how good they are.
And that includes leaders, the report says.
Yes, which means they might not even realize they should be questioning their expertise. They genuinely believe they've got it covered, so they naturally avoid digging deeper or seeking contrary advice.
All these shortcuts, these biases, they lead to this really interesting concept the report discusses, the efficiently irrational brain.
Yeah, this is a key idea. It suggests these irrationalities aren't necessarily bugs in the system. They might be features. Desirable economies, the report calls them.
Desirable economies, how so?
Well, the brain prioritizes saving cognitive energy, being efficient, overachieving perfect logical precision all the time, especially when faced with information that really challenges our core beliefs or worldview. That takes a lot of mental effort to process.
So avoiding the hard question is efficient in a weird way.
It can be, yeah.
That's
Efficiently irrational response. It minimizes the mental load and the emotional discomfort, even if it leads to a less accurate view of reality.
But sometimes avoidance feels bigger than just a shortcut. Like psychological denial, that seems more profound.
It is. Denial is a core psychological defense mechanism. It's a refusal, often unconscious, to accept reality or facts, mainly to shield ourselves from anxiety or emotional pain. And it's really a spectrum.
A spectrum, so it's not always bad.
Well, in some really extreme situations, it can be adaptive, temporarily. Like someone facing a terminal diagnosis might use denial initially just to function day to day, to avoid being completely overwhelmed. It buys them time.
Okay, a temporary buffer.
Right. But it flips to maladaptive when it stops you from doing something necessary, like delaying getting treatment for that illness because you're denying its severity.
And the report mentions something really wild about denial and memory.
Yes, denial-induced forgetting. It's this idea that the act of denying something can actually undermine our memory of it. We might genuinely forget information or experiences that contradict the reality we're trying to maintain.
We can literally make ourselves forget. That's unsettling.
It really highlights our capacity for self-deception, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when emotions are high. And underlying a lot of this, the report argues, is this really deep primal fear of uncertainty.
Which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, I guess.
Absolutely, it's wired in. For our ancestors, predictability often meant survival. Knowing where the food was, recognizing threats, uncertainty signaled potential danger. So our brains evolved this aversion.
Triggering the fear center, the amygdala.
Exactly. It triggers stress. And research confirms that people feel more stressed facing a 50% chance of a shock than knowing for sure they will get shocked. We crave predictability. We'll even, as the report says, invent all sorts of untested stories just to create that feeling of certainty and control.
But isn't there a paradox here? Sometimes uncertainty drives creativity.
There is. The discomfort can be a huge catalyst for innovation if we can reframe it. The challenge is shifting from that fear-based avoidance to a more curiosity-driven exploration of the unknown.
Which is a perfect segue into cognitive dissonance, that feeling when our beliefs and actions don't line up.
Right. That mental clash, that discomfort we feel when we hold contradictory ideas or when our behavior goes against our values, it creates this internal tension we're strongly motivated to resolve.
So we feel that clash, maybe guilt or irritation, and we just have to fix it somehow. How do we usually do that?
There are a few main ways. One is to change your behavior.
Yes.
If you believe in environmentalism but drive a gas guzzler, you might sell the car. That aligns action with belief.
Okay, makes it.
Or you might add new thoughts or justifications, like, okay, I drive this car, but I also meticulously recycle and offset my carbon footprint. You rationalize it.
Adding consonant beliefs.
Exactly. Or you minimize the importance of the conflict. Driving this car isn't that big a deal in the grand scheme of things, but the most problematic way, often, is to distort or deny the conflicting information itself.
Like the smoker who dismisses the health warnings.
Precisely. They reject the evidence, the science isn't settled, my grandpa smoked till 90, to reduce the dissonance between their smoking and the knowledge that it's harmful.
So we're basically bending reality to feel better internally. Even when the facts are staring us in the face, that seems incredibly risky, makes us vulnerable.
It profoundly does. We're constantly trying to maintain this coherent story about ourselves and the world. So avoiding those hard questions, those dissonant facts, often becomes this automatic, ingrained response. It makes us really resistant to changing our minds.
Which brings us neatly to belief perseverance, that sheer stubbornness of our convictions.
Yeah, holding on to a belief even when you get clear, contradictory evidence. It's pretty remarkable, actually. The report gives some classic examples.
Like doomsday cults.
Yeah, where the predicted apocalypse doesn't happen. But instead of abandoning the belief, the group often finds ways to reinterpret things and emerges with stronger faith. Or people sticking with believe and rigged calculators even after seeing them work correctly.
Even scientists aren't immune, the report says.
No, clinging to theories or formulas despite evidence against them. And students holding on to incorrect ideas, like thinking the Earth's shadow causes moon phases, even after being taught the correct explanation. Our initial beliefs are sticky.
The report briefly mentions the backfire effect,
Right.
where corrections make belief stronger, but notes it's actually considered pretty rare. Still, the overall cost of belief perseverance is huge.
It is. There's this striking quote, essentially saying, new scientific truths often win out, not because opponents are convinced, but because they eventually die off, and a new generation grows up accepting the new truth.
Wow, that's sobering.
It really is. And it helps explain why tackling massive, critical issues like climate change faces such deep, entrenched resistance. It's not just about the science. It's about challenging deeply held worldviews and economic systems. It can delay progress for generations.
So this isn't just inside our own heads. It scales up societal, cultural dimensions. Avoidance on a grand scale. Let's talk about groupthink.
Right, groupthink. That's when the desire for harmony or conformity within a group leads to irrational decision-making. Basically, everyone starts thinking alike, or at least acting like they do, to avoid conflict.
Then critical thinking goes out the window.
Pretty much. You see signs like an illusion of everyone agreeing, unquestioned acceptance of the group's core beliefs, rationalizing away any warning signs, people censoring their own doubts.
Self-censorship, yeah. Don't want to rock the boat.
Exactly. And sometimes you even get mind guards, people who actively shield the group or the leader from information that might challenge the status quo.
Why are we so prone to conforming like that?
It taps into deep needs, the desire to belong, the fear of being rejected or ostracized, social desirability, wanting to be liked, and probably an evolutionary echo group cohesion was vital for survival. We often assume if everyone else thinks this, it must be right.
It's got that double edge, though. Conformity can be good for social harmony, sure.
But the dark side is chilling. The report links it to how large-scale atrocities can happen, how extreme political polarization gets fueled. Even the bystander effect, people not intervening in an emergency when others are present, has elements of conformity and diffusion of responsibility.
So avoiding hard questions becomes contagious within a group.
Yeah, it creates this powerful social pressure. The need for acceptance can easily override rational assessment, making it really, really hard for one person to stand up and say, hang on, is this actually right? Even when things are clearly going wrong.
And this goes beyond immediate groups, right? To broader cultural norms.
Definitely. That's where the idea of cultural uncertainty avoidance comes in. Different cultures have different levels of tolerance for ambiguity and unpredictability.
How does that work?
Well, high uncertainty avoidance cultures. The report mentions places like Germany, Japan, Greece as examples. They tend to feel threatened by unknown situations. They like clear rules, procedures, and often believe in absolute truths. A sense of there's one right way, and we have it. They can be more resistant to change.
Okay, very structured.
Yes. And then you have low uncertainty avoidance cultures like Denmark, Singapore, Sweden are given as examples. They're generally more comfortable with ambiguity, less need for rigid rules. They tend to be more pragmatic, tolerant of different views, more open to change, and often more willing to question authority.
So our cultural background shapes how comfortable we are with even asking hard questions.
Exactly. It shows that avoidance isn't just an individual quirk. It's embedded in our social fabric, our institutions, our legal systems, even our philosophies.
And history provides plenty of grim examples of societies just denying inconvenient truths.
Oh, absolutely. Science denial is a recurring theme. Climate change, evolution, vaccines, HIV/AIDS, COVID-19, the list goes on. And interestingly, the report emphasizes this is often driven more by political ideology or economic interests than actual scientific illiteracy.
Using tactics like attacking the scientific consensus or floating conspiracy theories.
Right. And there's also implicit denial where people might say they accept the science, like on climate change, but their actions don't reflect the urgency. That's another powerful form of societal avoidance.
And it's not just science. Truth suppression has a long history. Socrates, Galileo.
Giordano Bruno, too. Thinkers persecuted by powerful institutions, governments, religious bodies trying to quash ideas that threaten their power or worldview. It still happens. The report mentions even recent psychological researchers facing threats for challenging certain beliefs.
Political denial is also stark. The report mentions Hermann Goering and the Nazis.
Yeah, his chilling quote about basically choosing to close my eyes to the atrocities. It's a terrifying example of evasion. We see echoes in genocide denial, the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, Srebrenica, and in modern political figures who deny established facts about, say, pandemics or climate science, or pressure scientists to alter findings.
It seems like a cycle. Truth emerges, it gets denied or suppressed.
But suppression rarely holds forever. The report makes the crucial point that this denial often sparks resistance. Think of slave revolts, anti-colonial movements, civil rights struggles, people pushing back against the enforced ignorance.
So avoidance isn't static, it's part of this dynamic push and pull in society.
Exactly. A force that shapes history, but also meets counterforce.
Now, this is where it gets particularly insidious, how these human tendencies get exploited. Manipulation, misinformation, disinformation. Let's quickly clarify those.
Sure. Misinformation is generally false or inaccurate information, maybe spread unintentionally. Disinformation is deliberate false information spread specifically to mislead people.
And both are weaponized.
Hugely. Impacting public health. Think vaccine hesitancy fueled by disinformation. Climate action stalled by it. Democratic processes undermined by it. It's a major challenge.
And then there's gaslighting. That term gets used a lot, but what does it mean in this context?
It's a really corrosive form of psychological manipulation. The goal is to make someone, or even a whole population, doubt their own reality, their own judgment, their own memory.
How does that work?
The report talks about leaders waging a war on perception, trying to destabilize the truth. They do it by constantly denying things they clearly said or did, by deflecting blame, distorting facts, telling blatant lies repeatedly. Think of political figures who just keep repeating falsehoods until people start questioning what's real.
It rewrites shared reality.
Exactly. It disorients people, makes it hard to know who or what to trust. It's a powerful tool for control.
So manipulators can actually leverage all those biases we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. They prey on them. The bandwagon effect, everyone thinks this. Affinity bias, trusting people like us. Dunning-Kruger, flattering people's sense of expertise. Sunk cost, we've come too far to turn back. Confirmation bias, feeding people information that confirms their existing prejudices. It's all used to maintain power, stifle dissent, and push agendas, often leading to really bad decisions for everyone else.
It really shifts this from just psychology to a critical issue of ethics and politics.
It absolutely does.
Okay, let's go even deeper, beyond psychology into philosophy, logic, math. How does philosophy tackle this idea of avoiding truth?
Well, one key philosophical challenge is the inherent subjectivity of human knowledge. Can we ever truly grasp absolute objective truth? The very act of thinking involves a subjective perspective.
So my truth might be filtered through my experiences, my biases.
Precisely. And from that perspective, denial can be seen as a form of motivated reasoning, where someone, maybe quite sincerely, holds on to a false belief because the truth feels too threatening personally, emotionally, or to their identity.
And this scales up to groups, right? Ideological denialism.
Yes, when facts challenge a group's core interest or dogma. Climate science denial is a classic example, cited the facts threaten powerful economic interests and political ideologies. It raises a really profound question. If truth is subjective to some degree, and we're prone to distorting reality to protect ourselves, can we actually establish a reliable, shared, objective truth?
That's a heavy question. And related to this, the report brings in logical fallacies, the nuts and bolts of bad arguments.
Right. These are flaws in reasoning that undermine an argument, but they often sound persuasive. They're like tools for avoidance.
How so?
Think about it. Ad hominem, attacking the person making the argument instead of the argument itself. That avoids engaging with the substance, the potentially difficult truth of the argument.
Okay, yeah.
Or the bandwagon fallacy. Everyone believes it, so it must be true. That avoids the hard work of critically evaluating the belief yourself. Slippery slope, exaggerating the potential negative consequences of an action to avoid dealing with the actual issue at hand.
They're like linguistic shortcuts around the truth. Lies in truth's clothing, as the report puts it.
Exactly. They let us feel like we're reasoning, but without the rigorous effort, allowing us to stick to comfortable beliefs.
And this brings us to something really fascinating. Mathematical models of irrationality. It sounds like we're almost mathematically wired for this.
Well, traditional economics assumes we're rational actors, always maximizing utility. But behavioral economics shows we consistently deviate. We have intransitive preferences sometimes, meaning our choices aren't always logical or consistent. And loss aversion is huge. We feel the pain of a loss much more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
So we make decisions that aren't strictly rational in that economic sense.
Right. But the efficiently irrational theory flips this. It suggests these aren't just errors. They might be efficient adaptations.
Efficient? How?
Because perfect neural computation, perfect logic, is metabolically expensive for the brain. It takes energy. Natural selection might favor brains that are good enough and fast, rather than perfectly precise but slow and energy-hungry. So these irrationalities are like energy-saving shortcuts.
Wow.
And there are even mathematical models, like the divisive normalization equation mentioned, that seem to predict some of these characteristic irrationalities. It suggests that avoiding the computationally hard work of pure logic is baked into our very computational architecture.
Our brains are literally built for shortcuts that sometimes mean avoiding the hard logical path. Okay, shifting gears now to AI. How does artificial intelligence fit into understanding this human tendency? The report calls it a mirror.
Yeah. Large language models, LLMs, are being used more and more to simulate human behavior in studies. You can have them role play as different types of people, expose them to certain information, and see how the simulated person responds. It's a way to study avoidance patterns cost-effectively and at scale.
That sounds incredibly useful for research. But AI isn't a perfect mirror, is it? It has its own quirks.
Definitely not perfect. LLMs have their own biases. They can sometimes give narrower, less diverse responses than humans. That's distribution alignment issues. They can inherit and amplify stereotypes, racial, gender, etc., from their training data.
And sycophancy.
Yeah, they might try to be overly helpful or agreeable, giving answers they think the user wants, even if they're not strictly accurate. There's also alienness, where the reasoning process is just weird, not human-like. And they can struggle to generalize beyond the specific data they were trained on.
So if we just rely on AI without understanding its biases, we could end up embedding new forms of avoidance or amplifying our own.
That's the risk. We need to be critical users. And this is especially true when we think about AI giving advice, particularly moral or ethical advice.
Why is that?
Well, studies show LLMs have some distinct biases here too, like omission bias. They strongly prefer inaction over action in moral dilemmas, even if acting would lead to a better outcome for more people. They tend to play it safe, avoid doing harm, even passively.
Interesting. And a yes-no bias.
Yes, they tend to default to saying no more often than yes. And their answers can be swayed by very subtle changes in how a question is phrased, much more so than humans.
Okay.
And amplified altruism, they often give more altruistic or goody-two-shoes answers than humans typically would, possibly because they're trained to be helpful and harmless, not because they have deep moral understanding.
So AI might avoid hard answers in its own way by defaulting to inaction or overly simplified good responses. This leads to a really intriguing idea in the report. Cognitive dissonance AI, or CDAI. What is that?
This is pretty cutting edge. It's an AI designed not to just give you clear, comfortable answers. Instead, it's engineered to deliberately create cognitive conflict, to sustain uncertainty, to make you wrestle with competing ideas.
An engine of doubt, not an engine of answers. How would that work?
It would do things like intentionally delay giving a final resolution. It would present you with contradictory viewpoints, both logically sound, forcing you to engage with the tension between them.
Making you do the hard work.
Exactly. It aims to promote epistemic struggle, pushing you to question your own assumptions, notice your biases like confirmation bias. It encourages you to synthesize different perspectives through reflection. And it would be adaptive, adjusting the difficulty so it challenges you without completely overwhelming you.
That sounds potentially revolutionary. Instead of AI just giving us information, it could actively help us think more critically, become more comfortable with complexity and ambiguity.
That's the hope. A partnership for intellectual growth, fostering humility, and the courage to face uncomfortable contradictions.
A tool to counteract our natural avoidance tendencies. That has huge implications. Which brings us back to the human impact. How does all this avoidance affect our well-being, our relationships?
Well, when avoidance becomes chronic or maladaptive, the impacts are pretty negative. We see increased anxiety, problems getting worse because they're not dealt with, lots of conflict in relationships, lower self-esteem. It can contribute to mental health issues too. Procrastination, passive aggressiveness, rumination are all linked to avoidance coping.
And in relationships specifically. Things like denial, projection.
They're toxic. They erode trust, shut down communication, prevent real intimacy. If you can't face difficult truths together, the relationship suffers.
But you mentioned the dual nature earlier. Sometimes avoidance is adaptive.
Yes, the report stresses that again. Short-term, temporary avoidance can be a crucial coping tool, especially with trauma or overwhelming grief. It gives you breathing room. The real challenge is knowing the difference. When is it necessary self-protection, and when is it becoming a barrier to growth, healing, or problem-solving?
That's a tough line to walk. What about the broader societal level? Education, ethics, law?
Education systems, unfortunately, can sometimes end up encouraging conformity rather than critical, independent thought. Students might learn to self-censor, not share opinions that go against the grain. And belief perseverance means they often stick to their existing ideas even when presented with conflicting evidence in class.
And the idea of willful ignorance comes up again here, legally and ethically.
Right. Choosing not to know something to avoid responsibility. Legal systems generally don't accept that as an excuse. If you deliberately avoid finding out facts that would make you liable, you're often still considered culpable. Ethically, it extends to turning away from complex moral problems because facing them is uncomfortable or requires effort.
And groupthink allows groups to do that collectively.
Yes, groups can collectively ignore moral problems, often convincing themselves they're righteous even while causing harm. It connects back to that idea of societal culpability. Are we responsible, individually and collectively, for the things we choose not to know?
That's a very hard question itself, and the connection to our relationship with nature, the environment. It seems unavoidable here.
Climate change denial is probably the starkest example of societal avoidance, with potentially catastrophic consequences. It's driven, as we discussed, by ideology and economics, actively undermining the necessary action.
And even the implicit denial accepting the science but not acting accordingly.
That contributes massively too. This collective failure to confront the hard truths about our impact on the planet directly threatens ecosystems, biodiversity, and ultimately a sustainable future for ourselves.
So given all this, what does an ideal culture look like for leadership, for society, if we want to overcome this avoidance?
The report paints a picture. It involves leaders who aren't afraid of bad news, who actively seek out dissenting opinions, maybe even appoint a devil's advocate, leaders who consult diverse experts and embrace a growth mindset, believing abilities can be developed.
And culturally.
Societies that score lower on that uncertainty avoidance scale. Cultures that are comfortable with ambiguity, open to new ideas, willing to question authority and tradition, where education prioritizes critical thinking, intellectual humility, knowing you don't know everything, and learning from failure, not just rewarding conformity.
And having a smart approach to rule breaking, understanding the why behind it. So let's get concrete. What are the recommendations? How can we mitigate this avoidance individually and collectively?
Okay, individually, fostering intellectual humility is key. That means consciously acknowledging our biases, maybe even taking an implicit bias test online, cultivating curiosity, embracing that growth mindset, actively practicing humility, asking yourself, what perspectives might I be missing here?
Seeking out disagreement almost.
Yeah, actively seeking disconfirming evidence, looking for information that challenges your view, getting multiple perspectives. And then for maladaptive avoidance specifically.
How do we tackle that in ourselves?
Self-awareness is step one. Maybe journaling, clarifying your core values. Then cognitive restructuring learning to identify and challenge those avoidant thought patterns. Making behavioral changes, building habits that align with your values even if they feel uncomfortable at first. Mindfulness can help accept discomfort without reacting automatically. Managing anxiety, building self-esteem, and definitely seeking professional help when needed. And critically, consciously choosing to confront uncertainty, trying to reframe it as a challenge or opportunity, not just a threat.
That's a lot for the individual. What about at the societal or group level? How do we fight groupthink?
Leaders need to be careful not to state their preferences up front in discussions, to allow other ideas to surface. Formally assigning a devil's advocate role can be powerful. Bringing in outside experts, explicitly encouraging dissent and making it safe. Maybe having second chance meetings where people can raise doubts after an initial decision.
Practical steps.
Yeah. Anonymous feedback channels can help too. Rewarding creativity and innovation, not just conformity. Having clear metrics for success to avoid motivated reasoning. And importantly, actively counteracting misinformation using psychological insights and fostering open dialogue even on taboo subjects.
The report ends by looking at who wins and who loses from this avoidance. It's not evenly distributed.
No, it's asymmetrical. The beneficiaries, often in the short term, can be individuals getting that temporary anxiety relief, or leaders and powerful groups who maintain control, suppress dissent, or push their agendas by exploiting avoidance. Groups might benefit superficially by maintaining harmony.
But the victims, the losers, that's often long-term and widespread.
Exactly. Individuals suffer from anxiety, bad decisions, broken relationships, poor mental health. Society suffers from the spread of misinformation, eroded trust, more collective decisions, the perpetuation of injustice, and stalled progress on vital issues like health or environment. And nature itself is a major victim, facing degradation due to our collective inaction.
That asymmetry really highlights the ethical urgency of tackling this.
It really does.
So finally, what's AI's potential role in guiding us toward a more ethically developed future, one less prone to avoidance?
Well, AI is uniquely capable of analyzing vast amounts of data to identify complex patterns of avoidance that humans might miss. And concepts like that cognitive dissonance AI we discussed offer a really exciting path, using AI not just for answers, but to actively challenge our biases and promote deeper thinking.
But ethical development is crucial.
Paramount. We have to be so careful not to build AI that just amplifies our existing biases or creates new ones. The goal is AI that serves truth, clarity, and critical engagement. AI could potentially design personalized learning tools that build critical thinking skills, intellectual humility, and resilience against manipulation from a young age.
Helping us become better at facing the hard questions.
That's the potential, yes. A powerful partner if developed and used wisely.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive has really shown that avoiding hard questions isn't just, a personal failing. It's woven into our psychology, our biology, reinforced by society, even linked to mathematical principles of efficiency.
It's fundamental.
But knowing all this, it changes things, doesn't it? It gives us awareness. So here's a final thought. What if the real measure of a healthy mind or a functional society or even a sustainable future isn't about having all the easy answers? What if it's about having the collective courage to keep asking the difficult questions, especially the ones that make us uncomfortable? What hard question will you choose to confront today?
This is DigitView.